Very important, but I do have to say, unfortunately, President Trump, the guy who says he's going after fraud, granted this man, Lawrence Duran, clemency last June. He was set free and let off the hook for the $87 million he owed in restitution, and Trump granted clemency to Duran's business partner last February, cutting well short her 35-year prison term. He literally undid the important justice work the FBI served and let fraudsters off the hook, and I find that deeply disturbing.
This is a story about Lawrence Duran. Duran ran a network of mental health clinics in Florida. On paper, they provided treatment for people suffering from severe mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe depression, people who had nowhere else to go. In reality, Duran's clinics were filing claims for treatment that was never provided. Patients were bused to the clinics, kept in rooms, given food, and sometimes drugs to keep them coming back, and then billed to Medicare as if they had received hours of intensive psychiatric therapy. They hadn't received any. Over the course of the scheme, Duran and his associates filed nearly 1 million false claims. The total amount stolen from Medicare, the federal program that funds healthcare for America's elderly and disabled, was $205 million. The FBI investigated the case for years. Federal prosecutors built it carefully. In 2013, Lawrence Duran was convicted. He was sentenced to 50 years in federal prison. His business partner, Marianella Valera, received a 35-year sentence. They were ordered to pay back $87 million in restitution. The FBI used the case as an example of exactly what the healthcare fraud and abuse control program was designed to do: identify the scheme, build the case, secure the conviction, recover the money. That is how it is supposed to work. On June 13, 2025, 5 months after taking office, President Trump commuted Lawrence Duran's sentence. Duran walked out of federal prison. The $87 million in restitution he owed was wiped out entirely. He owes nothing. 2 months later, Trump commuted the sentence of Marianella Valera as well. Her 35-year sentence, gone. At the same time, the administration was publicly campaigning on eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse in government. The Department of Government Efficiency launched. DOGE announced it had identified billions in fraudulent Medicare and Medicaid payments. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. told the Senate Finance Committee he had been calling for more funding for the healthcare fraud and abuse control program. He said it was essential. On April 22, 2026, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada asked Kennedy directly whether he had talked to the president about the pardons. On May 12, 2026, 3 weeks later, Senator Patty Murray of Washington asked the director of the FBI the same question from a different direction. She opened by praising the agents who caught Duran. Then she told Patel what happened to the case they built. Here is what both of them said.
Chairman, Director Patel, I want to start by recognizing important work by the FBI to crack down on fraud. In one case, the FBI helped bring justice multiple former business owners who orchestrated a $205 million Medicare fraud scheme on the American people. And those business owners filed nearly 1 million false claims for services that they never provided to any patients, literally stealing from American taxpayers and preying on vulnerable people who were suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia and substance abuse. But thanks to the FBI, those crooks were held accountable. So I just wanted to ask you today if you would pass along my gratitude to those FBI agents for their tireless work bringing those criminals to justice.
I will, ma'am. The fraud work is often overlooked, and I greatly appreciate that.
And very important. But I do have to say, unfortunately, President Trump, the guy who says he's going after fraud, granted this man, Lawrence Duran, clemency last June. He was set free and let off the hook for the $87 million he owed in restitution, and Trump granted clemency to Duran's business partner last February, cutting well short her 35-year prison term. He literally undid the important justice work the FBI served and let fraudsters off the the hook, and I find that deeply disturbing.
Kennedy.
If the drug works, we're going to approve it.
Let me just say,
Why would we hold back a drug that works?
I appreciate your comments earlier in this administration going after waste, fraud, and abuse. I think the healthcare fraud and abuse control program is important. I've been calling for more funding for it. I think it's essential that HCFAC has the dollars that it needs to go after in healthcare fraud. But let me ask you this. As we are fighting for funding for it to go after healthcare fraud, this president has actually pardoned at least 2 people convicted of healthcare fraud in just the first year of this administration. Mr. President Trump commuted the sentence of Lawrence Duran, who filed more than $205 million in false claims to Medicare by taking advantage of people seeking treatment for severe mental illness. Someone who defrauded Medicare for hundreds of millions of dollars. He no longer faces consequences and wiped out $87 million obligation in restitutions and fines. Have you talked to the president about the fact that he is actively undermining your agency's work to combat fraud?
The president doesn't consult me on his pardons. I don't know anything about that case. What I do know is that during the Biden administration, they purposely opened the door for hundreds of
I'm
billions
not
of
talking
dollars
about the past, I'm talking about now. So that answers
Yeah, but
no.
you're talking about one case that I don't know anything about. Why would I know anything about that case?
Let me tell you the reality in my state, Mr. Secretary, with respect to the Medicaid cuts. Effective May 1st, Boulder City Hospital in my state will no longer be able to support inpatient stays longer than 24 hours and will transform into a rural emergency hospital that rather than retain the current designation as a critical access hospital. According to the CEO, it is because of the financial constraints exacerbated by the upcoming Medicaid provider tax cuts due to H.R. 1. 71 people will lose their jobs because of H.R. 1 and those Medicaid cuts. This is one of my rural communities. This is going to be devastating for so many, and this is the first that we're seeing in my state. My question to you is, what are you going to do to make sure that our rural communities aren't left in a healthcare desert without a reasonable way to access those services?
We're putting the largest investment in history into rural hospitals. There's never been anything like it. Prior to the rural health
Apparently that's not true for my rural hospital in Boulder City, and many other are concerned. So you don't have an answer for that either.
There's rural hospitals are closing at an alarming rate around the country long before President Trump got in here.
Thank you. Senator Dane.
Director Patel, we need a serious budget, but we also need serious leadership. And I will say this, there's one clear priority in Trump's overall budget, and it isn't law and order, it is war. Because while Trump is proposing cuts to programs that really do keep people safe, he wants to increase war spending by $500 billion. And I don't need to tell anyone here we are not going to bomb our way to safer communities. So I intend to help rip that budget up and write bills that keep families safe. But beyond that budget, we need serious leadership at the FBI that the American people can trust. And I am deeply concerned about the reports that your leadership has not been serious. We need somebody at this agency who's focused on solving criminal cases, not passing out branded bourbon or jetting around the globe. Your job is to be reachable. And I know Senator Van Hollen asked you about this, but I got to say, if you want to pass out liquor or pop bottles in a locker room, stick to podcasting. Leave law and order to people who really do care about justice and appearances. That is really critical, and it's what I am really deeply concerned about, and so are many people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I respond? This is what real leadership looks like at the FBI. Every one of you was given it. This is what's happened under my tenure at the FBI and the Trump administration. 20-point drop in the homicide rate, 45,000 violent offenders arrested last year, twice as many as 2024, 2,450 criminal gangs disrupted, that's a 322% increase from 2024, 6,900 child victims have been located since I've been in the seat, that's a 144% increase, 2,900 child predators and human traffickers arrested, that's a 70% increase, and we've arrested 8 of the top 10 most wanted fugitives in the world in 14 months, that's twice as many in the 4 years combined. behind. That is what the men and women of the FBI are doing, well-resourced. Everyone should take a look at this. If people want to continue the baseless, fraudulent, false personal attacks at me, that's great. Keep the target on me, as I've always said, but the mission has never been better.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just respond.
Senator Murray.
I appreciate the work of our FBI agents, but leadership, serious leadership, is a concern. And we are seeing the pictures of passing out branded bourbon and what happened at the Olympics, and jetting around the globe and all the rest of it. And that, I will say again, Mr. Chairman, is of deep concern to me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murray opened her questioning by thanking the FBI agents who built the Lawrence Duran case. She named the scheme, named the victims, named the number. $205 million stolen from Medicare patients with severe mental illness, nearly 1 million false claims, almost a decade of work by federal investigators. Then she told the FBI director that the president had freed the man those agents put away, that the $87 million in restitution was gone, that his business partner, sentenced to 35 years, had also been released. Patel said the fraud work was often overlooked and he greatly appreciated it. He did not address the pardons. 3 weeks earlier, Senator Cortez Masto had asked Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the man responsible for the healthcare fraud and abuse control program, whether he had spoken to the president about the same pardons. Kennedy said the president doesn't consult him on pardons. He said he didn't know anything about that case. Then he said, one case. There were at least 2 cases. Duran and his business partner, both freed, both within the first 8 months of the administration that said it was going after fraud. The $87 million in restitution has not been recovered. Lawrence Duran has not been returned to prison. The healthcare fraud and abuse control program has not received the additional funding Kennedy said he was calling for. Murray ended her questioning by telling Patel to stick to podcasting, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The record, not just the promise. One case. That was the answer.